Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome. I'm Rob Doherty, and this is the FSTVS Podcast Executive Edition, supported by Libery Consulting and hosted by Julian Scott, the animation consultant for Film London. In this podcast series, we'll be chatting to the movers and the shakers in the animation industry, and discovering a little bit more about what they do, how they got there, their thoughts on the animation industry, and I hope get to meet the person behind that executive title. And Julian's guest today is Karen Miller. Karen's CV reads like a who's who of A-list studios and broadcasters. Disney, Warner Brothers, NBC Universal, the Cyber Group. Enough already! Now the president of the Hidden Pigeon Company, check out the etymology of that name later in the podcast, Karen is bringing her years of corporate experience in production and consumer products and creative talent to bear on projects she feels passionately about. I hope you enjoy this episode, and please do subscribe and share with friends.
Karen, thank you so much for finding the time to chat today.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to spend time with you.
Now, your career has spanned several major studios and broadcasters, Disney, Warner Brothers, NBC Universal, and Cyber Group, and most recently you became Chief Executive Officer of the Hidden Pigeon Company. And your production credits span primetime, kids, programming, live action and animation, movies and series, and you also have strong credentials in licensing, merchandise and channel management. That's quite a portfolio of skills.
Yes, I've been told throughout my career that I'm a bit of a unicorn, and I'm really quite proud of that. Again, it was not on plan. It was not on paper. It was just a pivot here and a pivot there. It was like you come to a place where, someone wants to take a meeting with you, and I always say yes, because you just never know. And I love talking to people. So, it was always an opportunity that's presented itself. And then, I either said yes or thank you.
Well, sounds like a very good strategy to me. And I wonder if your these wide-ranging career choices, did they stem from a childhood that encompassed a wide range of viewing experiences?
Well, my dad, interesting enough, my dad was in the TV business. So my dad, I was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in the middle of the U.S. My dad was a program director at the time at a little station called WTV in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And he was just on that kind of fast track in station management. So we moved from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He moved to a mid-station, tier station in Louisville, Kentucky. And then he moved to WTVJ in Miami. And then the Mike Douglas show at the time used to come down to Miami Beach and shoot 2 weeks on the beach with all the celebrities. And so he would be their point of contact for WTVJ for Westinghouse. And so then he was hired out of Miami to go to Philadelphia and be the exec producer of the Mike Douglas show. So throughout my dad's career, he would take me to work. And so I had this amazing ability to kind of see what he did, and he loved what he did. And so I had access, right? Mm. And I thought, wow, this is so interesting. And when I went to college, I actually worked at the TV station that my dad started at. And that was really full circle for me. I worked there on the weekends. I was a camera operator, which clearly I probably shouldn't have been, but I was a camera operator for the news. And it's a very small local station. So I would drive in from Iowa City, Iowa to Cedar Rapids on the weekends, and I would run camera on Saturday and Sunday. Then I would drive back to school. And again, I mean, I was open to different opportunities, and certainly always kept my eyes and ears open to things that I could possibly do. I mean, I was a very curious, I think, child, and certainly continue to be curious in my career. And so I try to learn as much as I can. And, I'm the first to say, I don't know, but let me figure this out. Or let me bring in the people that do know. And so, yeah, it wasn't so much what I watched. It was just having access as a young child and seeing my father and seeing him love what he did, and just thinking, I want to do that one day.
That's really interesting that you saw with that access that you had. It's like, I want to do this one day. And so I'm guessing that clearly the entertainment bug bit early, and it must have run through your veins. And you were talking about doing the camera operating work and then kind of going and driving back to school, because you did 2 uni courses, didn't you?
Yes.
One in broadcast and film production at University of Iowa, and then broadcast management at California State University. How did
Yes.
those courses measure up, and what were the main takeaways for you?
So my family has a long history of being at the University of Iowa. And so for me, I had gone to high school in Miami. All my friends were going to stay in Miami, and I was the odd one who was leaving to go to Iowa. And I loved the environment in Iowa City, Iowa. I loved their football. To be perfectly honest, I've always loved sports. I love their football team. And so I went to University of Iowa and didn't know anyone. I got there. I was on a path in the broadcast and TV uh, building and selection of courses. And I was able to do what was my senior project in my second year of school there. And so I got to a point where I was like, I worked at a TV station. I've done my senior project. I'm sure there's more I can learn. But by then, my parents had moved to Los Angeles. And so I would call home. That was the time when you didn't really have a mobile phone. And so you would call home you'd call home once a weekend. And I'd say to my parents, like, what are you doing this weekend? And they'd, very quietly say, oh, we're, just, sitting by the pool, or it's very warm. And I was like, oh. So I made the decision to leave behind my friends, and I was in a sorority. I played tennis at the University of Iowa. I was on the tennis team, and I chose to leave it. And I went to Los Angeles, and I enrolled in university there. And I got a job as a page at a Metro Media television at the time, where they did a lot of Norman Lear's series. They did so much production there. So I was a page. And then
Sorry, when you say you're a page, what does that mean?
a page, so you would help seat an audience. So they were sitcoms. So you would bring in the audience, you would help get them seated. You would often be assigned to answer phones on a soundstage. And so during rehearsal or camera blocking that week, you would be the one who would be answering the stage phone.
Okay.
Or if they were rehearsing up in the rehearsal halls, you would be assigned to answering the phone in that rehearsal hall. So it was fantastic because you were in the middle of it. You were seeing the show being put on its feet. And so you just had access. You had access to what everybody's jobs were. You wore a uniform. So you stood out. And so you had to have, proper behavior. You couldn't be, in awe of all of this, quite frankly. You had to do your job and be professional. But at the same time, I took it as an opportunity to understand what the gaffers and, the camera operators and the stage manager and the UPM and what everybody did. And, I loved it. It was truly amazing. I mean, I answered phones for the most part on Three's Company a long time ago. And so just seeing John Ritter and the brilliance of John Ritter and Suzanne Summers, I mean, just, Carol O'Connor on Archie's Place. I mean, it didn't get better than that. Right. And I was 20, 21. So I used it as an opportunity when I moved to LA to get a job in the business and to go to school and to try to kind of, I guess, get my foot into the door. But I didn't know what I was doing, to be perfectly honest. I had no idea. I had no idea. I was just, I think, fumbling and stumbling through it and looking at an opportunity and saying, okay, I can do that. And at one point, when I was at CBS, I was a page at CBS Television City. And I was filling in on a desk in an office for the production supervisors. And they oversaw all the shows that were in the building. And so one day this man came in. He was a producer on a soap opera, and they had just fired their script supervisor. And he was mumbling and grumbling about that, and said, "Can you do that? Could you do that job?" Now, I've never been a script supervisor in my life. And I was like, sure. Yeah, sure.
Uh,
So he goes, okay, we're going to train you. We'll give you 2 weeks. And if you can't do this job, you won't have this job basically. So that afternoon, I ran out. I went, there's a clock store on Pico. I think it's still there. I think it's called Fenmar. And I went down and I got a calculator of time, a calculator that calculates time. And I got a stopwatch, the professional stopwatch that they used. And then I started to train with the script supervisor she was having a bit of a breakdown because it was a really tough show and she just wanted off of it. So she trained me and she was like bitter and angry because she was exhausted. And I was like Susie Sunshine and it was probably completely irritating to her. But I took this job and then I was on the soap for 5 years and became an AD while on the show because again, it was a soap opera. So they gave you an opportunity to do other things. So I became an AD. I got in the Directors Guild and I just had access to that part of the career and then realized that I didn't want to be a director because I just didn't see the shots the way I knew I was supposed to. And so I kind of took the route of being a producer, but it was a very pivotal moment.
And this is all live action, yeah?
That was all live action. Yeah, that was soap operas. Again, in the US, these soap operas at the time, they never got canceled. They ran for 20, 25, 30 years. I mean, I literally was like, I have made it. I have made it. I am in my early 20s. I'm on a soap opera. The cast is amazing. The show was called Capital. It was a political show set in DC. And then 5 years into it, it got canceled and replaced by a series called The Bold and the Beautiful that is still running today.
Yeah.
And so I had to pivot. And a friend of a friend, I went to take a meeting at Laura Mar Television, which is now Sony, which is now where Sony is. And I was sitting in the lobby and a friend of mine walked through and she said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm here to see so-and-so." And she said, "Well, I'm on a series, I'm on a pilot, and our executive producer just fired his assistant because she just sleeps on the sofa all day. So will you just come and do it?" And I was like, "I can't. I'm going to play tennis later." And I mean, just stupid excuses. And she was like, "Just help me out. Just do this." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." So she wore me down. I show up the next day and it turned out it was the pilot of Full House. And so we did the pilot of Full House with Tom Miller and Bob Boyette and Jeff Franklin. And it was fantastic. And then we sat and waited for the show to get picked up. And in the course of that, the exec producer said to me, "Look if you're not doing anything else, I need an assistant. You're competent. Would you want to stay?" And I was like, "Sure." So I stayed. And then the series got picked up and the rest is history. So I was on Full House for, maybe four or 5 years. And then there was a lot of noise at the time in the industry about film. And this was on tape and you have to learn film. If you don't learn film, your career is over. So I was like, okay, I've got to get on a film show. So I went to Tom Miller and Bob Boyette and they put me on The Hogan Family, which was a Sandy Duncan series. Created and done for Warner Brothers. And so I was on that series. And then they were very prolific at the time. And so there were a lot of shows that they were producing. And so I then jumped to another series. And then I became a coordinating producer and had access to a lot of different series. And so that was kind of how I spent my time in live action, was just started out by being at the right place at the right time, getting out of my own way and saying yes, finally, after this lovely woman, Yoli, kept saying, "Just do it. You could play tennis tomorrow. Just come the next day." So finally, again, I mean, I feel very fortunate to have had these opportunities, but I will say, I never felt I was lucky. I felt like I had then to work my ass off, right? And really keep my job and do my job. And so I think it just afforded me the ability again to be part of a team that was building something and then observe what other people were doing and figure out where I felt like I was most interested. And that was my time in live action. It was amazing.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes people sort of new entrants into the industry, they look at people who are sort of further up the ladder, if you like, in executive positions and sort of, big jobs and stuff like that. And they have no clue that someone like yourself had, in your words, worked their ass off to get where they were. And they were making coffee, they were, running errands, they were
Oh,
answering phones, they were seating audience members, all those jobs which, I don't mean to demean them, but somebody could see as maybe a little bit menial, but that's the
yeah,
bedrock of someone like yourself's career.
totally. And I mean, I felt like, my favorite time was in production. I love being in production. I love being on location. I mean, I will go get anybody a coffee to this day. We have meetings in our conference room and people just get up. I pick up their cups and put them in the kitchen. That is
Yeah.
just who I am. Like there is no sense that I'm better than all of it or any of it. Like I grew up in this business and I'm so incredibly fortunate to stay and to remain in this business. But I'm acutely aware that we all kind of have to support each other. We all have to jump in. You could have taken a very elitist approach, I think, to your career, to any of this, but I'll say that it doesn't get you anywhere. I mean, maybe it gets you somewhere, but I would argue it may not keep you there.
I think that's absolutely true. I completely agree with you. But you made quite a significant change in your career, didn't you? Because you're on an upward trajectory in live action, doing these very, very well-known soap operas and comedy shows and things. And then, bam, you're into animation. Why?
Yeah. Tom Miller and Bob Boyette's, their shows just, they were the TGIFs. Thank goodness it's Friday. They were
Mm.
the tent pole of ABC at the time. And one by one, those shows started to get canceled. And I had a really good relationship with the production team at Warner Brothers because I could run a series. I ran it on time. I ran it on budget. I was respectful to the teams. And so when the WB decided that they were going to enter the animation space and compete with Fox, the studio put Baby Blues in production, which is based on a comic strip by Rick Kirkman and Jerry Scott. And so the production supervisor on that series called me and said, look, would you consider doing this? We need somebody who knows how to run a show, regardless of whether you've ever done animation or not. So, and it was a guy named Pete Acco, and these guys they'd come from The Simpsons. And so there was a process and, there was a writer's room and they literally were writing until the animation was literally on the screen. And, I said, sure, yeah, I'll do it. And, kind of had to crack open. I, I'm trying to think, like, did I Google it? I don't think so. I think I had to crack open, like, how the hell do I do animation? Like, what's the process? And surrounded myself with really smart people. And we built an incredible writing room. And so we did 2 seasons of Baby Blues. And we started with Warner Brothers Animation. But early on, we were having problems with animation because this was a very board driven show.
Mm-hmm.
And, I took a very risky point of view and said, like, they're not the right partners for us to animate with. And that was not necessarily what the studio wanted to hear because obviously they wanted to keep it all in house. And so they gave me the ability to go out and shop it. And we did it with Rough Draft Animation in Glendale and Claudia Scott and Scott Banzo. And I mean, amazing. It made all the difference in the world. And so we did 2 seasons with them. And then in the course of the second season, I think the studio had greenlit The Oblongs, and they were having some challenges with The Oblongs, and a series that Jace Richdale had done. And they asked if I would go and help out, like, temporarily. And so I was like, okay, fine, sure. So I went, and it was a very different experience than Baby Blues. Baby Blues was like a very family friendly. I mean, it was an adult animation, but it was just very family friendly the way it was written, and it was just super organized and lovely. And I went to this new production, and it was a challenge from day one. I remember sitting in my car after the first day and literally crying, like, what have I done?
Oh dear.
Why am I here? Yeah. Oh yeah. It was like really one of those things like, holy hell. I mean, this is really hard. And I came back the next day and we worked through all of it and just got it back on course. And it's an amazing, it's to this day, it's still both Baby Lou's and The Oblongs are on. And it's an amazing, amazing, amazing series by Angus Oblong. And it starred Jean Smart and just an incredible cast of talent. But yeah, I mean, I was a trusted producer that they needed, and they gave me the shot. And yeah, it was fantastic. I loved it. I loved it. It was having come from live action, which happens very quickly, and you produce a show in a week and you move on, and while you're in that week, you're also prepping for the next episode. This was a very different experience, and one that you had to have a lot of patience for, because it took a long time, as we know, in animation.
I was going to actually, you've probably answered my next question, which is, what do you feel the big differences or similarities between producing live action and animation are? Maybe there are no differences. It's just a sort of a perceived difference.
Yeah, I always looked at it as, yes, it's obviously the different medium, live action versus animation, but it is very similar in the way in which you organize the production, and you make sure that you have the right support people in place. And, and obviously the animation studio is the key to it. And in the case of Rough Draft, they just plussed everything out. They made that show better. And, I think, whether it's the keys that you have on a live action series and your lighting director and your directors every week, or an animation studio, it's just having that team that is capable of making everything better. And so, yeah, I found it to be similar, but unique in its own way due to the challenges that are just inherent in both of those mediums.
This podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the awesome Liberi Consulting. Liberi offers specially tailored industry-related training courses. Check them out at libericonsulting.com. That's Liberi consulting.com. You can also find links to their fantastic courses on the Festivus website.
You've run, both in live action and animation, you've run big teams, big productions and things like that. What is it that you think makes a good leader in that environment? You're the producer, you're on top of the tree. You've got different departments. You've got directors, you've got assistant directors, costume designers, and in animation you've got series directors, you've got voice directors, you've got animators, you've got character designers.
Sure.
What is it that you think makes a good leader of those kind of creative teams?
I think it's like listening to the people that are empowered, that are experts at what they do. And, and communicating. The biggest thing is just opening up a conversation and listening to what people think is that the right, outfit? Or when we're doing wardrobe checks, is that the right, background design or character design? Is literally listening to the experts and not having all the answers. Again, I think I know where my strengths are, and I know enough to create an environment that allows everybody to be heard, and also to participate. Because again, everybody wants to add value to what they do, and they also want to be part of a team. And if I had taken a different perspective and was like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to dominate all these decisions, I would have a very unhappy team. And I worked for people like that sometimes were challenging, and then I worked for people that were very inviting. And I always chose the inviting path because, again, you're just empowering people to do their jobs and to be proud of it. And that's all we want, right?
No, it really is.
I mean, I really think it's pretty simple. I mean, again, you hire the right people, you hire people that are smarter than you hire the people that are the experts, and you let them do their job. And quite clearly, if they don't do their job, they're not going to keep their job. And that was a very early lesson for me, was like, I'm going to trust you to do your job. And if you don't do it, you will be replaced. And so it's never been lost on me. I have to show up every day and I have to show up well. And I also have to create an environment that allows people to feel as if they can own what they do and that they can win at it as well.
That's really interesting. And I completely agree with you. And you say it's really simple. I think it is simple too, but it's amazing how many people can't do it in terms of being leaders.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've worked for a lot of assholes. I mean, yeah, it's really, I think, both my kids are in the business, and I will say that I say to them often that having a bad experience is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than having a really good experience in something, because it does allow you to hopefully understand and not repeat those experiences. It also really puts you at the center of being able to control how you react to those situations and how you pivot, whether you pivot by getting another job or you pivot by, problem solving. And I think, I feel that we're so incredibly lucky and fortunate to be able to do what we do and certainly what we love. But, not every day is a perfect day. I mean, whether you're in this business or not, you have to find a way to find the joy.
Indeed. No, you're 100% right. And speaking of finding the joy, I mean, you by this point, you were involved in Baby Blues, you've done Oblongs, you in production, you've done live action, you've done animation very successfully, but then you moved into a related but quite different area of the business, still with Warner Brothers, but this is in consumer products.
Sure.
And I think you were asked to identify and analyze global properties, animated and live action, for development based on their merchandising potential and entertainment value. Did you have to apply different rationale to what might succeed in terms of consumer products in live action and animation, or were the same kind of values that you have to apply?
Well, I will say once again, I took a meeting. Someone asked me to go to a meeting. Dan Romanelli, who was president of Warner Brothers Consumer Products, who was a legend, Warner Brothers, Full House was a Warner Brothers series. And so there was a licensing program for Full House. And so oftentimes I was the point of contact to either the talent or to the exec producers in terms of executing that licensing program and working with Warner Brothers Consumer Products. And so I knew just a little, I paid attention, but I knew just a little. And so Dan Romanelli asked me to go to this meeting because he was looking for somebody. It was during the days when he was a leader. I mean, he definitely was a visionary at this, because he said that I can't sit around and wait for the next, big film. I need to control our destiny. So I need to be able to bring in projects or certainly circulate them throughout the studio that perhaps somebody else can make. And then we can then ultimately create content, create consumer products for. So I was there just advising him. I was on the Oblongs at the time, and I was just to advise him. And I spent about an hour and a half with him. And at the end of the meeting, I said, I think actually I want this job, which I had no intention of taking. It was the furthest thing from me. And so he was like, okay, well, you'll have to interview with the senior team and, we'll start tomorrow. And so I had to go home and look up licensee and licensor. I didn't know. And so I interviewed and I thought, well, this is really interesting. And I was curious and I loved content. So I saw it as an opportunity to go to book expos and go to markets and take pitches and really try to evaluate content and kind of then circulate it to the teams within Warner Brothers. And there was really no one doing it. I mean, yes, if you sat in television, you were doing it, you were trying to find content, but you were looking at it in a very different way. You were taking pitches from agents and such. And so this was very boots on the ground. And so I took the job, and then shortly thereafter discovered that within Warner Brothers, there was Little Brown Publishing. There was this entity, that was that entity. And again, I don't think anybody really looked outside of their own line of business. And so I went to New York. I started to get galleys on books that Little Brown was publishing. And I'd go to book fairs. I'd scout book properties or take pitches. And I came across this book that was in galley, and it was Gossip Girl. And yeah. And so I brought it back, and I said to Dan, like, this is really, really good. Like, there's something here. This is really good. And so he said, okay, we'll send it over to features, and because we need to get credit for it. And I said, no, we need to slide it under their door. They need to be able to own this, because the last thing they're going to do is they're not going to respect that this piece of content came ultimately sourced through consumer products, because we're the people that make t-shirts and mud flaps. And there's not a lot of respect from a creative standpoint for that. Mm-hmm. And so he trusted me. And so we put it in the hands of the feature team. And then I think it moved from features to television, and Josh Schwartz did it. And so, yeah, it was sourced through, literally through myself and Dan Romanelli, who read it in galley form. But again, like, had we taken a very here it is, and consumer products is giving you something, they wouldn't have taken this seriously. It just wouldn't have happened that way.
You had to be really strategic about it.
You had to just be you just had to be able to read the room. I feel like, I mean, again, I feel like that's also something that I feel very, I'm very self-aware, and the room was telling you that if I took something over from consumer products, they would have laughed at us. They would have said, what do you guys know about content? You just make product based on something that we know. You don't create.
But it's curious, isn't it? Because all through, when I was producing my career, there was an element of that, but I've always felt that the whether it's a kids audience or a primetime audience, the audience who are buying the toys or whatever it is are the same audience that are watching your show. So there has to be a to and fro in terms of spotting good IP, spotting good content, and flowing from one to the other. Surely.
Yeah. The reality is, I don't think any of us can be precious about any of it, because again, great ideas are out there. I think people just sometimes need to stop and take a listen. And I think everybody has a story to tell. And, I remember when I took my job at Disney, and I was into acquisitions. So I'd spent the time at Warner doing acquisitions, and I'd gone and jumped to a Italian company called Atlantica, who had a book series called Geronimo Stilton that we were able to get launched and in production. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to Disney, one of my very first pitches within a week, sitting at the table taking a pitch. And after the pitch, they leave, and my two colleagues say to me, you have to be very careful. Words matter, and you can't give people the wrong impression about your area of interest. And I remember saying, yeah, but have you sat on the other side of the table? I've sat on the other side of the table, and it's very difficult. And you look for someone to be encouraging. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you're going to buy their content, but you're allowed to smile. You're allowed to nod. You should engage with them, because, again, have you ever pitched to Disney? We're the problem, not them. And I just remember because I had pitched to Disney when I was at Atlantica, and it was a harrowing experience. And I remember taking the job thinking, I'm going to take this job and I'm going to change it, because no one should have to go through that. And so I left that meeting, and my boss's boss came by at the end of the day to check on me. And I said, I think you hired the wrong person. And he was like, why? What is that? And I said, look, this is who I am. I have to be authentic. And I've sat on the other side of the table. And the only way for us to get great talent in is for us to be a place people want to come to.
Mm.
And we're Disney, and we're it. We're at the top of the pinnacle. And if we don't support talent and we're not encouraging, they're not going to come. And so he was like, no, I hired exactly the right person, and just continue on. And so I did just that and stayed there for 8 years, and then grew that job to a global job. But yeah, I mean, again, if you've sat on the other side of the table and you've been a creative and you're out pitching, man, you know how to behave, or you should. Let me put it that way: you should know how to behave.
Sure.
You should love content enough to give someone the due respect. It's their 30 minutes. Let them pitch their show. Let them tell their story.
Yeah. And it's also their baby. They've sat, that 30 minutes is the pinnacle of months, maybe even years of work.
Totally. And it's also like you're Disney. I mean, you're Disney. And this is the pinnacle of where you want your show at the time to be. And so, you need to create an environment where people want to come. And also, I mean, in the room if something is going to work in theory or not, or if there's a grain of an idea that's worth exploring. And the best thing we did was we let people know. We followed up and we shared with them why it wasn't a perfect fit for us. And again, it allowed them to move on.
Yeah.
And to take the note.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest bugbears, I think, as a producer, and you will have known this from your time as a producer, is when you pitch something into a big studio. And I hear it to this day from people I work with. You pitch a show into a broadcaster or a studio, and they just come back and say it's not for us. But there's no rhyme nor reason. And I suppose part of that is the potential buyer thinking, well, if I give them too much of a steer, then they might come back. But on the other hand, if you don't give them enough of a steer, they can't grow as a creator, they can't grow as a producer, and bring you something that's more appropriate for you.
Yeah. And first of all, the fact that somebody came back is great, because in many cases it's like there's no response.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to chase somebody for a response. And that should never happen, quite frankly. But I also feel like, there are people that don't read, right? Like they are in charge of acquisitions or content, and they don't read content. And so there's a reason why they can't come back to you, because they haven't read it. And that is incredibly frustrating. And unfortunately, that's a real thing. So, yeah, I took it very seriously, having been on the other side of the table and understanding that oftentimes it wasn't so much that there was something wrong with what was being pitched, but it was because of the confines, certainly of Disney and the platforms and our brand values, something just wasn't a perfect fit. And it was less about them. It was really more about the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just as good to tell somebody that. It's just as valuable.
No, for sure. And am I right in thinking you went from Disney to NBC Universal?
Yeah, so 8 years into Disney, a woman named Deidre Brennan. Deidre was at NBC at the time, and she came to LA, and she wanted to have a coffee, and she wanted to talk to me. She was sourcing someone for this head of creative at Universal Kids. And so I came prepared with a list of people for the job. And I was like, here, you should talk to so-and-so and so-and-so. And she's like, no, I'm actually talking to you. And I was like, no. I have a job. I'm really happy with my job. And so she kind of, again, wore me down and was like, look, here's what this entails. This is an opportunity for you to manage a team. This is an opportunity for you to be strategic about what we do. And we're committed to making content for kids. And so I did my due diligence. I took a lot of meetings with the team that was in New York, and I took the job and I left Disney, and that was a big deal. And I got there, and about a year into it, the senior team at NBC said, yeah, this kids business, it is really hard. And it takes a long time. And so we're just gonna continue with the acquisitions we have, and we're not gonna make any new content. So that was, I think it might have been the first or second time that they just dumped Kids and Family.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went on to do Peacock, and then they dumped Kids and Family again recently. So there's a pattern, unfortunately. But I loved my time there. I loved the team. I loved the content we were making. But that was not a priority. And so it was right before COVID, and I had the rest of my contract to kind of sit out. So I did that during COVID, which was really, it was nice to be able to spend time with my family and my parents and take care of them and not have to worry about working. And then, from there, I had Cyber Group Studios came calling, and I had known them when I was at Disney. We had done Gigantosaurus together, a series for Disney Junior. And so I took that on to run the US office, and it was great. I mean, I spent 3 years there. We created a series called Press Start that is on Peacock. And shortly at the end of kind of my 3 years, I took a call from someone who said, hey, there's an opportunity at a company that's been recently created called Hidden Pigeon Company. And it's a joint partnership between Redbird Capital and Stampede Ventures and Mo Willems. And would you be interested? And again, I took the call and went and met everybody, and loved the folks that were sitting on the board. And it had been my first experience dealing with private equity and with a board. And I love it. I love it. I have to say, I'm a huge fan of Redbird Capital. I'm a fan of the team that's there. And I will say that after having spent a lot of time in corporate and just all the noise that sits in corporate and all the layoffs and the restructuring and all of those things that happen, and oftentimes happen, you just are a name on a piece of paper. And it is tragic, and it is very emotional, and all of those things. And unfortunately, it's happening much more common than it was certainly when I was sitting at corporate. I will say that it's incredibly refreshing to work for private equity because, and Bob might have said the same thing, but my job is to bring enterprise value to the company. And if I don't do that, they should fire me. It's very clear, like that is my job. And so there is no, there is nothing else. That is my role. And so I think just having the security in the sense of that's my job and that's what we're building. It just allows you to do your job without all the other noise and clutter around.
Sure. And Hidden Pigeon it's entirely based on books written by Mo, is that right?
By Mo Willems, yeah. So Mo Willems is a very prolific writer, very, very, very well known in the U.S. and certainly in the English-speaking territories. 77 books and counting. I mean, he, again, very prolific. He took a little sabbatical in August of last year, and I think he wrote like 3 books. I mean, it's mind-numbing. But the words and pictures of Mo Willems are incredibly authentic, and they resonate with an audience, and they have a long history. In fact, when I was at Warner Brothers working for consumer products, I sourced Mo's first book, which is Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. And I walked down the hall bringing this to the team to say, this is going to be something.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, yeah, just sit down. Like, we're not going to make an animated series based on this. That's not what we do. And so then a couple years later, Knuffle Bunny was produced. And again, same thing, walked down the hall, and they said, just go back and sit down. So for me, 20 plus years later, I now work with Mo Willems, who I had never met during that time, but I get to shepherd Pigeon and Knuffle and Elephant and Piggy and so many of the other fabulous characters that he's created. And it's called Hidden Pigeon Company because in every book that Mo does, he hides a pigeon.
Oh, right.
And yeah, so that's where the name comes from. And we're having a blast. I mean, we're making some really great content, and we've got a great consumer products line that is just launched with a musical box called the Tonys, and we're doing something with Hannah Anderson and pajamas, and we have we're involved in Major League Baseball. We do some kids and family days with the Yankees and the Royals. So we're having a blast and building a business and making cartoons.
That sounds heaven. Real, perfect for you.
It's just delightful because, again, it resonates with kids and families and educators, and it is just, again, words and pictures by Mo that are so authentic, and it's been a dream, quite frankly. I mean, we're having so much fun. We're working with Blue Zoo in the UK, which I love and adore.
Mm-hmm.
We're working with Brown Bag. So we're very fortunate. And again, with Blue Zoo, it's like they've come to the table and they've plussed everything out.
Yeah.
And that's why you choose very carefully the partners, and we try to get out of our own way, quite frankly, and let them do what they do.
No, wearing my, Film London being one of my sort of key clients, I am delighted that you're working with Blue Zoo.
Oh, Blue Zoo is just a fan favorite. I mean, I love A Prods too. I love A Productions. Worked with them. They're so good. So hopefully we're gonna do something with them. But yeah, I'm a huge fan.
What is it you think about the UK and Ireland that's attractive from a animation studio perspective?
Well, I think, first of all, I think they have impeccable taste. And for us, I feel like also, Mo Willems perhaps is not as well known in the UK or Ireland. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like there may be a character as Pigeon is probably the most well known. So having a studio that creatively doesn't have the same, perhaps closeness to it that we have has allowed us and allowed them to be incredibly creative and probably break the rules, but break the rules still in a very authentic way. And again, just elevate it. And, that's what you want. You want someone to come in, and Blue Zoo, I mean, just blew us away. They, which was a little risky. They came in before our tone meeting, they came with some thumbs, an animatic that they had just pulled together because they were so in love with the project. And I mean, we were like, yes, and I mean, it just was that good. And I think for us, it was a reminder that oftentimes we need to get out of our own way. We're the problem, right? Because we come with perceived ideas and opinions about the rules of engagement, and their sense of purity and joy and fun to the character and to the project is what has elevated it to another level. Again, you want people who have good taste. You want people that just, you can see their work and you can see the joy in what they do. They get kids. And also they have fun doing it. And that's who we want to be with and spend time with.
Mm. You've used that phrase 2 or 3 times as we've been chatting, which is, we need to get out of our own way. And you said about yourself, sometimes I need to get out of my own way. Is that, as we're sort of beginning to wind the conversation up, is that a key piece of advice you might give to somebody getting into the business now? And what do you really mean by getting out of your own way?
I mean, I think that I feel like, maybe I think when you first enter the business, in some cases you've gone to uni, or you've studied in some capacity, and you feel like, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go, this is what I'm going to be. And I think, that's all well and good, because I think you have to have a starting place. But I also think instinctively, I think we know, right? Like, I think we have to listen to ourselves. And I think when something doesn't feel right or doesn't feel good, or we're not enjoying it, or we're not working for the right person, I don't think necessarily we allow ourselves to listen to ourselves and to say, I don't want to do this. And I'm going to pivot to go do this, or I'm going to go change my job, or I'm going to go work on a different show. And I think, there's a lot of fear when you first start. I don't care what business you're in. I think just to be young and to start your career, there's fear. And I think if you're gonna blow something up, do it in your 20s. Do it when you're young. I mean, just do it and figure it out as you go along. And again, I think for me, getting out of my own way is sometimes me thinking this is what I need to do or I want to do. And it's me actually saying, no, I don't want to do that, or no, I'm not going to do that, or no, I'm not going to tolerate that. And I say that in the sense of, I think, certainly there are situations where we're put in that no matter how much you've spent time in this business, there are always people that think they know better and want to control a situation. And I think, you get to a place where you're like, that doesn't sit with me. And you're going to hear my voice now. And I'm quite clear on that. And that is, I think for me, that's getting out of my own way. And I would say, like, pressure is a privilege. Billie Jean King, played tennis when I was younger and just a big tennis fan. And I remember that quote by Billie Jean King, and it's true. Pressure is a privilege. And we are privileged to be in the situations that we are, no matter whether you're a CEO of a company or you're in charge of, you're in charge as, someone's assistant or a PA. There is pressure. And it is a privilege. And I think the best thing we can do is just pay attention to all of the stuff around us and try to just not listen to the noise.
Good advice.
As always, a big thank you to Karen for making the time to join Julian for this episode, and thank you for listening. And the show wouldn't happen at all without the wonderful work of Janet Balmforth at Liberia Consulting for her incredible organisational skills, to Julian Scott at Film London for his charm, wit and talent as our host. Find out more about Film London at filmlondon.org.uk. And the edit skills of Odelia Sikinga, who is also an awesome kids development and production executive. Find her on LinkedIn. If you'd be interested in sponsoring or advertising on the podcast, then please reach out to me directly at aloha@fstvs.net. That's aloha@fstvs.net. Bye-bye.